Now this is my speed. Special thank you to all my lovely patrons, especially Nerf Nothing for being an amazing pro patron. Greetings audience, I'm Boomstick, and today we're going to be talking about the Motortier from Domochevsky. Now first things first, I will say that I built this Motortier myself, supplied with hardware from Domochevsky, which is the reason why it doesn't light up as much as the other Motortiers you've probably seen, because yeah, it turns out wiring up LEDs is a pain, and I may have shorted out the LEDs here and here and here. So apologies to Domochevsky for not being able to show just how cool it is all lit up. So yeah, my apologies to both Domochevsky and you, the audience, because I can't show you just how much cooler this thing is because it lost a couple of LEDs. But aside from that, let's talk about what is the Motortier. The Motortier is a 3D printed flywheel blaster that utilizes some modified fly point shells, and it fires them out of these 3D printed double stack mags. And as you saw from the opening, this thing is full auto, with a rather high rate of fire, full auto I might add. The Motortier features this handy dandy on-off switch on the top, as well as this nice little LiPo alarm here to let you know when your LiPos are getting to those unsafe levels, or when you should change out LiPos. And speaking of LiPos, this thing has a nice LiPo compartment here with plenty of space for whatever size LiPo you may need. I've got this nice little 3S LiPo in here. The Motortier is also designed to use any standard strife cage. Now, it is not designed to work with the Band Blaster flywheel cage. However, I did modify this one to accept flywheel from Band Blasters, so take that into consideration. I do believe that there are or at least there is a new cage mount that allows you to use the Band Blaster cage, but when I built mine, there was not one available, so I had to do some slight modifications. So yeah, but having a 200 FPS flywheel blaster that uses shells, I'll take that. It does also feature a small piece of Nerf rail right along the side here. Now, I don't exactly know why Domochevsky continues to use Nerf rail. Much like the rail cleaner up here, I ended up just adding some Nerf to Picatinny rail here, and I'll probably do the same here so I can add a little rocket or crooked cousin or something along those lines. Because yeah, having a nice little side rocket right here would be really nice to take care of specials or shields or whatever it is. So, but then again, you could also get the Nerf rail if you really wanted to. I just personally prefer Picatinny, but it does have that as an option. So, yeah, there you go. The Motortier also has an end strike attachment on the front for you to be able to put on any of your Nerf barrels that you'd like to throw on there, which I think is actually pretty neat. One of the features I do really appreciate when using the Band Blaster setup is this little fan right here that helps keep your motors cool, just to keep them from potentially overheating. Not necessary in most builds, but it is a nice feature that I enjoy having. Now, with the way that the mag well works here is you are actually able to top load your mag. In case you had just a dump pouch full of shells, you could easily grab them out of there. Now, I tend to run my dump pouch on my left side, which I did find to be an issue because I would reach for my left, and now I have to go all the way over here to get it to top load. So, because of the way it ejects from the right, I would definitely recommend grabbing from or putting your dump pouch on your right side so you could much more easily switch hands and top load, and then you're still kind of at the ready, which is a really neat feature of being able to top load something like this. I find that incredibly useful. For those moments when you have a second between engagement and you still have half a mag, so you don't feel like changing mags completely, and you just want to top off a couple of rounds. But when your mag is empty, there's a nice little handy mag release there, which works well. Grab yourself a new mag and slide it all in. Now, even though the fly point shells are modified, they do still work very well in previous iterations that also use fly point shells, with no noticeable difference in performance from what I could tell. Now, you can get your own Motortier from Domochevsky's Etsy, which I will have linked down below in the description. And that does actually include files. They have their files listed on there as well, so if you don't feel like paying the cost for getting it from Domochevsky, you can print it out yourself and source your hardware. Now, the only piece of hardware that I think is going to be tricky to find is going to be this giant motor in the back here. This is a beefy motor back here. The motor goes from about here to here. It's a big boy. As far as printing goes, I did not have any issues with printing this blaster. It printed fairly well. I didn't run into any issues, so yeah, standard printing. As far as assembly goes, mostly pretty good. I did have the same issue I had with the rail cleaner, where the screws that Domochevsky included with the hardware, you have to be careful about not over tightening them, because the way they work, they will start cracking the PLA that I used. So that was an issue, and I did run into that several times where I over tightened the screws a little too much, and it did lead to some parts cracking, unfortunately. The other issue I ran into with assembly is just the amount of wires inside the Motortier. Because of the LEDs, the fan, the switches, the motors, the cage, all these electronics have their own wires coming off of it, and there's just a lot of wires, especially in this section up here. There is a lot. So if you're not so good on the wire management, you might just want to get this one pre-built. Now let's talk about comfort. First thing I'll say, it's a bit of a hefty blaster. Because of this big motor back here, it does have a good bit of weight, but when it's shouldered up and you're using two hands to fire it, it's not that bad. So I don't really notice the heavy weight in the back as much. But if you're trying to single hand this and wheel it around, I will say that your arm's going to get fairly tired just because of the amount of weight in the back of this thing. But I will say, when running around in games, I didn't have any discomfort. The grip is fairly beefy, but not uncomfortably beefy. It would be nice if it was maybe a little bit more rounded in these pieces right here, but overall it's not uncomfortable. It didn't bother me while I was firing it. But yeah, this is the Motortier. Let's go take it out into the field and see how it performs. I first took the Motortier to the Maryland Nerf Herders, which has an FPS cap of 200. Now, this was before I started printing the modified shell point shells from Domochevsky, which led to me having more jams than would be expected because the shells are tighter on the dart, which led to the pusher not being able to always push the dart into the flywheels. Once I had printed a nice supply of modified fly point shells, I was able to take it to another event with the Southern Maryland House of Nerf for their Invite Indoor event. And there it did really well. It was very comfortable to shoulder. I had a really good time using it behind cover, running around, being able to use it on the fly. It was a very competitive blaster. Now, I will say changing mags wasn't the smoothest. It did work very well, as did the top loading. Overall, I just had an amazing time running it on the field, and while I don't think it's the most accurate band blaster setup, it was accurate enough to get the tags that I needed. Now that we've run it on the field, let's give our overall opinion. First thing I'll say is, it's so much fun. Much like many of other Domochevsky's designs, there's so much fun in using them. There's really nothing to compare this blaster to that's kind of has the same feel as it. The closest you'll currently get is the Fly Point as far as a shell ejecting flywheel blaster. But as far as something like this where it's full primary worthy, and because you can set it up with pretty much any strife cage, this is the perfect flywheel blaster. Now, if you don't like shells, I can understand why you wouldn't like this blaster. But if you've ever run a shell-fed blaster, you know how much fun they are. And having something that's full auto, and you get 30 rounds in a single mag. Now, while this mag does seem rather large, compared to other blasters that have that capacity, it's hard to beat this. And that is one of the pros that me and my podcasting crew, the Dart Jam podcast, shameless plug, talked about in our shell episode. That because the darts are inside of a shell, you can pack them more tightly in a mag, allowing you to load in more darts and double stack. We've yet to see a half dart double stack mag, and for good reason. They don't perform well because it squishes the foam. But when a dart is in a shell, you can pack them much tighter and double stack them. And in my opinion, that is a decent pro to this. Now, Domochevsky does have smaller mags for this as well, but I think if you're going to run the Motortier, you're going to want these full-size 30-round mags. As far as cons go, I did talk about it a little bit in the field portion of the video, but loading is not the easiest because it has this big empty space here. It allows it to wobble around a little bit more, allowing it to not load as smoothly. Whereas if this was enclosed and just a solid piece here, it would allow you to load it in a lot smoother. And as I said before, it is a fairly weighty blaster, and it is definitely a funky looking blaster. I personally like how it looks, but I'm not going to necessarily disagree with people when they say it is a, I'll use the term ugly blaster. I don't consider it ugly, but I could see how some people could consider it to be. I personally really dig the sci-fi look of it, and I love it. The only other minor con is I'm not a huge fan of these exposed switches. I haven't run into an issue with it. It just is unappealing to me. So it's a really minor complaint. But between the amount of fun that you have and the fact that this is a very competitive flywheel blaster, I really think that it's worth checking out at least. Now, obviously, the price is a big factor. This is an expensive blaster, especially if you want to get it pre-built. So this is definitely something that you're going to want to think about because of the price. Now, do I think the price is justified? After building one myself, I do understand why it does cost that much between the cost of the parts, the amount of, or just how big it is, and the actual wiring it up and building it, the amount of time it takes. I understand why the price is that high. If you don't think it's worth the price, I won't blame you. But for me personally, I think the price is justified. And this is definitely one of the coolest blasters that I own, and you will definitely be seeing me run this at games. It'll pop up a lot, I guarantee it. Now it's time for our scoreboard. I think I can safely say that the Motortier is going to go right there. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. So yeah, if you want that full auto shell ejecting madness that is the Motortier, then I highly recommend this blaster. You will not regret picking one of these up. This has been my review of the Motortier by Domochevsky. Definitely check out the links down below in the description, and let me know what you think of the Motortier. Is it worth it for you? You have to let me know, and as always, give the video a like, subscribe if you want to see more, and I've been Boomstick, and I'll see you on the field.
Hi, Andrew. It's not my fault you ran in front of me. All right, go ahead. Oh, thank you. Yeah.